Welcome to the Last Mile Profits videocast, the last word on the last mile.
Modern Expo provides an integral ecosystem of screen-operated lockers, screenless autonomous solutions, refrigerated lockers, and even personal parcel lockers, powered by in-house developed software. Hello everyone, it's holiday time, so I'm going to be on my own today at Last Mile Profits, but I've got a super cool topic which I think is very relevant today, and I'd like to talk about changes at national post operators in Europe. This is really important because a lot of change is happening. Some of it's visible in the form of industrial action, and some of it's not so visible. So we'll talk about, why flagship national post operators are going through so much change. What do they need to do to survive in the modern era or the modern last mile? And what challenges will they face as they undergo this sort of change? So, the thing that most of us will have seen fairly, I would say, frequently, particularly if they're based in the UK, is the industrial action. So people are clearly not happy, people being the workers, not happy with how things are changing. Ironically, the net effect is that customers are also not happy because there's disruption in service. And I think this is perhaps one of the most obvious symptoms of the sort of issues that are being faced. But let's take a step back first. So, why do we have these sort of challenges? Some of you will have heard of the USO, the Universal Service Obligation. And what it does is it puts certain requirements on postal operators. And those requirements will relate to coverage, how many physical outlets they have to have, what sort of quality of delivery. Quite often, in return for becoming a designated operator, the one that serves a given geography, there will also be, on one hand, limitations on the prices that can be charged for certain services. Sometimes there will also be subsidies. So that there are pros and cons, but generally speaking, it's getting more and more difficult to fulfill these universal service obligations because, let's be very honest, mail volumes are falling. And this decline has gone on now for many, many years. So, I was talking to the producer before, and we decided this is a cool topic. It's so complex. There's so many different elements. And we'll try and sort of cover them one by one. So you've got the USO, which is increasingly difficult to maintain given lower volumes. You've got Labour and unions who are unhappy with the way that change is going in some postal operators. Ironically, customers sometimes don't notice change, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So that's the background to the sort of issues that we faced. So let's move on to perhaps what do posts need to do to survive in this modern era of change, of parcel dominance versus mail dominance, of more demands, and I would say a more assertive, in many ways, labour force. So perhaps the first thing is to have a good plan, because if a post continues to operate the way they did for the last 20 or 30 years, despite the fact that the market has changed, I think it's fair to say that they will come a cropper. There needs to be a plan. If we look at some of the more successful posts in Europe, and I think good examples would be Groupe La Poste, who did have a plan. They decided they'd create something that was called DPD, and recently the name was changed to Geopost Group. And Geopost was almost a box in a box. It was the free market part of the post that could operate in international markets, that could be very entrepreneurial in the way that it operated, and very different to the traditional La Poste business. Deutsche Post became a listed company, bought several players ranging from DHL. I'm trying to think of all of them. There was probably about 10 players or so they bought at a given moment in time. And they've become a very large group worldwide. So, it can be done. There are posts that have been very successful, not in everything they've done, but generally speaking, they've found a way to really take a lead, to move into areas like the parcel business, which are growing. What about the posts that haven't done that so far? What do they need to do? I think, first of all, and probably above all, they need to get their workers on board. The workers need to understand that without change, we won't get anywhere, and that there's a need to actually implement change that will be customer centric, that will keep the post relevant. While that change may, in some cases, mean that in some places there will be less need for labor used in the traditional way it was, I think new opportunities will arise, and perhaps there'll be the chance to earn more, even if there are less people needed in given roles. And the reality is, at the end of the day, if those changes aren't made, the post will be uneconomic, uncompetitive, and everybody will lose. So I think those things need to happen, but that involves, certainly in my view, a need to be able to talk to the unions, talk to the labour force, get them on board, get them to understand the issues. Second thing, actually, is quite often when the USO, the Universal Service Obligation, is discussed, they have things like delivery 5 days a week, sometimes even 6 days a week, I think. But that perhaps can also change. I was very impressed with what postal, which I hope is a good enough accent, Norwegian accent for Norway Post, what they were able to do. They actually looked very carefully at what their customers expected, and they noticed that for non-tracked mail, people really didn't realize whether a letter was arriving on day 1, 2, or 3. So what they experimented with is a model whereby in 1 week they were delivering 3 days, and in another week they were delivering only 2 days a week. This was, of course, for the cheapest non-tracked mail, and there is an option, of course, to have a premium service which is delivered every day. But I think this was quite creative, and it's part of the sort of solution to make a post more competitive, able to actually offer the USO products in a competitive manner. I said I'd talk about challenges, and I think during the course of the discussion that I had with you earlier, I raised some of them. Probably the biggest one is to get the guys and girls at the front line on board, to really seek to understand what the customer wants, to be able to perhaps offer something that's good enough. But the one thing I didn't mention is also the need for new products. There's no question that customers require new and better products. That could involve better quality of tracking. You know that I love the phrase IDM, Interactive Delivery Management, or Uber for parcels, whereby they can see what happens. And above all, many posts, I think, can be considered remiss in the fact that they haven't developed out of home. Some of them, Deutsche Post has been pretty successful. Unfortunately, Royal Mail is an example where very little has been done. So it's an exciting area. Please do add your own comments. Maybe I've missed things. Maybe there are other things that you think could be helpful. And it would be great to have your comments, your views, especially on LinkedIn, and we can seek to answer as many of those as possible. Thanks for watching this Last Mile Profits video. For more up-to-date last mile news and analysis, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn.